Looking to drop some body fat just in time for summer? Then this is the podcast for you, because today on MuscleTV, we are deep diving into everything related to fat loss. My name is Luke Schembri. I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Scotty Goble. Scotty, welcome.
Thank you, Luke. Looking forward to talking about fat loss, something that pretty much everyone is interested at some time in their life.
It is. And mate, we've had a lot of guests lately, so it's nice to sort of do a bit of a deep dive into fat loss. We've covered contest preparation and we'll touch on some things there, but this is just for anyone who's looking to drop some body fat, wants to know all of the ins and outs. This is the episode for you. So, mate, straight away off the top, scale weight. Where does scale weight fit in? In particular, if you're training with resistance training, how accurate is scale weight when it comes to body fat reduction?
Look, if you need to drop a significant amount of body fat, the scale weight has to go down. It has to. I don't care, who you are or what you're doing. And now there are plenty of variables that impact that scale weight, whether it's digestion or hormones or hydration or inflammation or any number of things. They can impact it. But what we are looking for is a trend over time. And if that trend over time is showing a decline on the scales, there's a very good chance you're dropping body fat. So minor fluctuations, nothing to freak out about. But at the end of the day, the scale weight is going to have to go down. So I think it is an effective measuring piece. You?
Without a doubt, mate. And you hit the nail on the head, looking for trends, not absolute over time, not absolute values as such, because of all of those fluctuations. And you touched on a couple: digestion, how much food's in the digestive system, hydration levels for females, maybe even monthly hormonal cycles, muscle glycogen, even a few bad nights of sleep can really throw your body in havoc overall. So definitely looking for those longer term trends. Scotty, if there are a couple of, let's say, people that are dropping body fat that might see some absolutely amazing results with increased lean mass and a drop in body fat at the same time, that'd be beginners starting with a resistance training program, but also a long-time trainer who's maybe taking a break and they're getting back into it and they pick up the weights again, and their scale weight might actually come up while their body fat's coming down for limited periods of time.
Yeah, I've certainly seen that with my client base. That they're generally the exceptions rather than the rules, and they do take place under those very specific circumstances. If you can get newbie gains, you can build muscle while even in a deficit. Muscle memory is a very real and legitimate phenomena, and you can rebuild muscle that you've previously carried while in a deficit. So yes, you can drop body fat and not see huge changes in scale weight, but significant changes in composition if you are one of those people that fall under those particular categories. But I mostly deal with fairly high caliber athletes. They spend the entire year trying to maximize their muscle mass. And when they're going into a deficit, they're not building any muscle whatsoever because they're not exposed to a new and novel stimulus like those that are training for the first time. And they don't have any muscle memory because they're starting their deficit at their peak muscularity. So if you fall under, that sort of specific category, then you cannot really expect to recomp a great deal. And again, scale weight should be trended down.
That's right. And if we're looking at measurements and taking the best measurements, we've touched on the scale weight, of course. I'm a very, very big fan of scale weight and your waist measurement and photos. Those three things combined, that really it gives you a good idea of what's going on. Where do you fit DEXA scans in? And what about the, is it the BIA scanners that you see in the gyms, where you hold on to those electrodes and it's supposed to give you an accurate representation?
Yeah, look, electrical bioimpedance or something, and the DEXA scans, they've probably done quite a few of my clients' heads in over the years. They've had a very successful prep. They're thrilled with how they're looking, and then they go and get a scan, and they're like, it's told me I've lost 4 kilos of lean muscle and I'm still 9% body fat, but I look shredded and fantastic. But now I'm miserable because I have this report that says this. And I actually fell victim to that once as well. I remember being 2 weeks out of a show and I went and got a DEXA scan and it told me I was 10%. And I was like, I was so angry that the person that tested me, I was like, it's saying I'm 10% of my arms. Look at my arms. I picture them. Tell me now that's 10%. So I was one of those irrational fools at that time. And look, a lot of those things, they have their place. They all have their place. But there is variance and error involved. Bioelectrical impedance, it's something like a 20% error. DEXAs are quite accurate, but they'll do things like measure fluid and muscle glycogen as lean mass. So it's not unusual when you're in a deficit, you're going to lose glycogen, and with that goes intramuscular fluid, and therefore it appears like your lean mass is decreasing when in reality you've still got the contractile tissue, it's just flatter. So those things are interesting, and if you can view them completely objectively and remove emotion from them, then they probably have a useful application for fat loss. But for me, I'm exactly the same as you. Pictures, waist measurement, scale weight, that's pretty much all I need, and we can get you nice and lean.
And we have looked at an unusual number of photos of individuals, Scotty. I'd say in the tens of thousands. It's been a lot that we've seen. I know I've certainly picked up some things from a visual perspective that I notice when people are dropping body fat. In particular, males, I dare say you've seen a lot more females go through the process than myself. But when it comes to males, there's a few surprising areas. If you're taking a couple of photos of yourself, or a front photo, a side and a back, some areas that you mightn't think. I have found the upper abdominal region just under the chest, that moves very fast when it comes to body fat increasing or decreasing. And often you'll see changes there in terms of the size of your actual waist, how wide it looks, well before you see anything on the waist measurement you take on your belly button. That also corresponds to the middle back region. If you turn to the rear, that middle back region tends to lean up very, very quickly. Another area I've noticed, Scotty, over the years from the rear shot is somebody's traps. The traps seem to increase or decrease in body fat from a visual perspective very, very quickly. And so if you're just looking at your own photos, there's some areas that you might want to just assess yourself. Your upper abdominal region, your middle back region, and even your traps. They, from a visual point of view, you can really notice that body fat increasing or decreasing quickly. What about yourself, Scotty, with your female clients? Is there anything visually that you look for?
It's really interesting that you said those things, because I was instantly thinking from the female perspective, since that's probably 75-80% of my client base currently. And believe it or not, it's the exact same areas. It's upper abdominal region and it's upper middle back is normally where I see the fat come off first. And I'm sure you've had, the odd bikini girl send you a video of them doing a lat pull down and saying, look, I'm shredded. And you're sort of like, yeah, upper back is, yep, very, very good. Keep going. So yeah, I normally see it in those areas as well. Like, I mean, it is quite typical for women to have those traditional estrogenic fat deposits around the hips and things like that. So that's normally the last place you see it. So yeah, it is normally waistline, and it normally starts high and works its way down. And yeah, I see it on the back as well. So I'm quite interested that you found the same thing. And I guess everyone's got their different body fat distribution, but as a generalization, I think those are the areas I notice myself.
And talking about body fat distribution, not all body fat's equal. So we've got subcutaneous body fat just under the skin. We've got visceral body fat, the deep body fat in between the organs. And one of the reasons why the visceral body fat's so problematic is because it's active releasing inflammatory markers into the bloodstream. An increase in systemic inflammation is a risk factor for every disease you want to avoid. I was actually shocked, Scotty, at the effects visceral body fat has on inflammatory markers. Cardiovascular disease, I think we know the association there. And but trouble controlling your blood sugar, insulin resistance, certain types of cancer, even gingivitis, arthritis, inflammation of the brain that can lead to early onset of Alzheimer's or dementia or Parkinson's. So the deep visceral body fat, the stuff that's in between the organs, your waist measurement's going to show up. That is many, many times more problematic than subcutaneous body fat. And mate, I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, but I remember years ago reading a study that even relatively high levels of subcutaneous body fat are nowhere near as much of a risk factor as visceral body fat. And say you've got an individual that's got relatively lean arms and lean legs, if they've got that visceral body fat, then they are considered, to be quite high risk for a lot of those conditions that were just mentioned.
Yeah, and that is generally, at least to my knowledge, more of a male thing than a female thing. And I think there is some hormonal contribution to that, whether I think it's the relationship between testosterone or cortisol or something along those lines. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. We see that in the male population with higher risk of cardiovascular disease and things like that. And I'm not at all surprised that there is that association. So look, ultimately, when it comes to the reduction of visceral fat in comparison to subcutaneous body fat, the vast majority of the same principles apply because you need that general fat loss in order to manipulate the sort of hormonal levels and insulin sensitivity and all that to allow you to access that visceral fat at the end of the day. So I don't know that you can specifically target it unless you've got more information. It sounds like you've done more research than me in that regard, but it is most definitely a problem from a health perspective.
Mate, from my my understanding, visceral body fat is the first one to drop because it is metabolically active. And so you can drop visceral body fat a lot quicker than you can drop the subcutaneous body fat. I never knew, mate, when it comes to gingivitis, not only can the increase in systemic inflammation increase gingivitis, but it's bidirectional. So an increase in gingivitis, it goes back down your throat and it can increase systemic inflammation. It goes both ways.
Right. Okay. Well, you're a practical gingivitis expert over there, Luke.
Oral hygiene, eh?
Yeah. Tell me more.
Yeah. Okay, mate. So let's say someone wants to just get in shape for summer. I love that goal. Fantastic goal. Maybe it's a few months away. Have I left it too late? Right now, it's the end of September. I'm hoping maybe around Christmas time to go away with the family. Look, I enjoy training. I'm not a bodybuilder, but I'm a serious trainer. Have I left it too late for a run to drop maybe 6 or 7 kilos, let's say?
Well, you got about 12 weeks or so until Christmas. Oh, that's scary, isn't it, Luke? We've got 12 weeks for Christmas. So, look, you can take off a reasonable amount of body fat, and the amount of body fat you can take off is probably, to a degree, in proportion to your overall size. Like if you've got, and you would have seen this yourself, like when you're a huge guy, it's pretty easy to pull off a kilo of body fat because your metabolism's humming along, you've got an enormous amount of muscle mass, all that sort of stuff. But if you're a smaller female athlete that perhaps is new to this, you don't have a very supportive metabolism, you don't have a whole lot of muscle mass, then it is going to be harder for you to lose large numbers. But when expressed as a percentage of your body weight, you can probably achieve similar things. So what's your general rule of thumb when it comes to chasing fat loss and the acceptable rate?
Mate, I do like that 0.5 kilo per week sort of mark, aiming for maybe a 500 calorie deficit, just on average. But like we've said, there's a lot of, variation based on the individual, their body composition. There's a lot of factors there, but I do find that time frame is relatively reasonable. I think the hardest part is, and mate, if you've got someone new who's coming to you in coaching and they want to trim up for summer and not having that baseline to establish where they're at. And look, one of the first things I always recommend to people, Scotty, if you finish your children's plates of food, if you're a little bit of a nibbler here and there throughout the day and you have unaccounted for sauces and fats, it's nearly 500 to 700 calories a day extra just with that. And that's one of those situations where, you're like, I've tightened up my nutrition. I'm eating great, clean main meals. I just don't know why it's coming off. And then you sort of dig a bit deeper and, I finished my children's plate. Look, I've just had a nibble here and there and, sauces and fats. I didn't really account for that. But 500 to 700 calories on average a day just for doing those things.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm not sure, I know my dad would have been quite significantly older than your dad. My dad was raised in a boarding home and he lived through the Depression, and the thought of wasting food was absolutely horrifying to him. It had been burnt into him as a child that you just ate every scrap of food because you weren't sure where your next meal was coming from. So he used to finish all of our food, and I believe that he has passed that on to me, and I am now blaming him and his oppressed upbringing while I had the best of everything, as do my children. But I finish their plates of food. I'm guilty of this, but I'm an intuitive eater, Luke, so I'm allowed to. It just means my intuition tells me to eat less later. But that is a really fascinating stat. And another stat I remember coming across is that people underestimate, if you get someone to write a food diary or track their food, they still, even when recording it, under-record by about 20% calories. So it's very difficult to ascertain exactly what an individual is eating without them going on a strict diet and modifying and measuring and calculating everything. So yeah, the initial setup of a deficit can be a little bit tricky, but if you've been working with an athlete for a while and you've managed to establish their maintenance calories, then it's very, very easy to rip off 500 calories a day, assuming they have those calories to spare. Sometimes you establish maintenance calories for a smaller female individual and it's like, we're on 1600 calories. All right, we take 500 off that. That is a significant drop and maybe unsustainable drop in calories. Whereas if you've got a guy who's on 4,000 calories and you rip off 500 calories, it's just no issue whatsoever. So the bigger you are, generally the easier it is to drop body fat, certainly initially.
Yep. And so that has to be the number one thing, doesn't it? You just need to track what you're doing currently. That gives you the baseline. You don't even have to stay on it very long. You might only track for a week and then be like, look, I'm going to modify things from there. But just establishing that baseline so you have some understanding of where your total calories are. If we were to break down the macronutrient targets, Scotty, what are the targets you'd aim for somebody who's looking to drop body fat? Yeah, fairly experienced trainer, not necessarily in a contest prep, just looking to get in shape for summer.
Look, I would start with protein. I always start with protein, and I'm looking at my at least, and it depends on the individual. It depends on their seriousness and depends on their previous habits. If they're very, very new to this, they've been eating a very traditional diet, or they perhaps haven't been tracking at all, and you try and put them on 3 grams of protein per kilo, it can be a shocking amount for some people. So I might start as low as 2, but I would much rather they were on 2.5 to 3 grams of protein per kilo. Fats are normally... look, again, it's the low end is 0.5 gram per kilo. The high end is 1 gram per kilo. And again, it depends on the individual. It's probably somewhere in between that. And then the carbohydrates are just making up the rest as far as I am concerned. So that's normally how I do it. Yeah, protein, fats. I want to ensure the fats are at least 20% of their total calorie intake, just to prevent any hormonal suppression. And then the remainder is carbohydrates purely for fuel and to get us to our total calorie target.
Mate, I'm pretty much exact as we've established before. I follow those guidelines myself. Seems to work really well. Seems to be a very happy sweet spot. Mate, if we take a shift now to training, so you've just entered a calorie deficit, I guess there are a few little things to consider. Number one, you can't drop body fat doing resistance training. It's just got to be hours and hours of cardio. There's no other way. That's a big one. Another one to, initially dropping some volume maybe in training. I've never been a big fan of this if someone's in a deficit. And the reason is if they've got body fat to utilize for extra energy requirements and they're certainly not going to die, might be a consideration for somebody at the end of a contest prep or something like that. But just generally speaking, in my opinion, resistance training is the absolute king when it comes to body recomposition. You use a lot of energy in the gym while you're training. There's a very big recovery response that comes about after the training that takes more energy. And then if you've got more lean muscle mass, then your resting metabolic rate's going to be slightly higher because you've got more metabolically active tissue. And that's a virtuous cycle, because if you've got more lean muscle mass, you can be stronger in the gym, you lift more, you get better results, and it can wind up very quickly. So for me, without a doubt, resistance training is the number one form of exercise for body fat reduction. What about cardio, Scotty? Where does cardio fit into the equation? I know we sometimes have slightly different views on cardio. You're big on your steps and you get amazing results with it. I don't mind doing a little bit of cardio.
Look, cardio is a tool at our disposal. It allows you to burn calories, and we are trying to create a calorie deficit. So the more calories you burn, theoretically, the bigger the deficit, assuming you're controlling the intake. So cardio is absolutely valuable. I would completely agree with you that resistance training is mandatory and cardio might not be mandatory, but it plays a significant role. And the best thing about it is its efficiency in terms of time. Steps take time. By nature, by definition, it's just low intensity walking, and you need to accumulate a lot of that to expend a significant amount of calories, whereas you can do so in a much shorter space of time with cardio. Now, cardio might have some negative repercussions if you're doing it in close proximity to resistance training with the same muscle group. I think we've covered the interference effect before on one of our podcasts. Maybe it was a previous iteration, but the reality is cardio can have a negative impact on performance or recovery, but that's generally if you do it in close proximity to the same body part. So if you're going to smash a leg workout, probably don't jump on the stairs for half an hour, 45 minutes immediately before, immediately after. Outside of that, there's not really too many downsides of doing cardio, to be fair. So to me, it comes down to time management as much as anything else. If I've got people that love walking and they've got the time to do so, I'll prioritize that. If I've got people which are very, very time poor, or perhaps they just enjoy cardio and they find walking incredibly boring, then we'll use the cardio. They're all just different tools and they all burn calories, so they all work.
Now, a big one that comes up all the time is fasted training versus training in a fed state. There's some for and against on both. I mean, the one that's commonly cited is cardio. if I'm doing cardio in a fasted state, I'm going to use more body fat or more fats as a fuel source. That's true. However, if you do cardio in a fed state, you've got a greater potential to use more total energy. Even though the energy you're using during that time might be more from carbohydrates, the overall net effect is I'm using a greater amount of calories for that particular session. What about resistance training, Scotty? Where do you sit with resistance training? Just before you answer, a study, Lane Norden, it was a meta-analysis that came out, I think, last year looking at carbohydrate ingestion. And they looked at, I think it was like 19 different studies, whether carbs before training has any benefit or not. And, the two factors they found where carbohydrates does give you some benefit. If you're training in a fasted state, so you're waking up in the morning and you're doing resistance training, and or the session goes for longer than an hour or about an hour. Given either of those two circumstances, looking at this meta-analysis of the studies, they found that anywhere between 30 to 90 grams of carbohydrates will see a small increase in your performance. And there was no difference between the 30 grams up to the 90 grams. So long as it was in that range, then the results were fairly equal.
Well, firstly, I appreciate the fact that you asked me the question and then you actually provided me with the answers from someone who's vastly smarter than me. So thank you, Lane Norton, for performing this meta-analysis. I've never been a big fan of resistance training in a fasted state. I do believe that you accelerate catabolic processes. Perhaps that is a bit of a bro sciencey take. I can't remember where I actually got that from, but I personally believe that, and I've regurgitated this to many of my clients, that your body has a finite capacity to store amino acids, and it does so primarily within the muscles and within the liver. And the liver largely gets exhausted or emptied out of those amino acids overnight because there's constant demand for them. So if you're resistance training hard first thing in the morning with no circulating amino acids in the bloodstream, in order for your body to access them, it might have to catabolize other tissue to get to it. So I would like some people to train either in a fed state or ingest a carbohydrate drink with some EAAs or something along those lines would be my preference. That's not to say that you can't resistance train fasted. You absolutely can. It's going to be a hell of a lot better than no resistance training whatsoever. If you find that you get nauseated by ingesting even 30 grams of glucose, sipping on it throughout the duration of your workout, then maybe it's not the best for you. So at the end of the day, it always comes down to getting it done and fitting it into your lifestyle. That's priority number one. But yeah, if we're talking best case scenario, I'm fine with fasted cardio, not a huge fan of fasted resistance training.
Can you imagine back in the day, Scotty, let's say maybe 2006 or 7, training without taking Vitago and extend branched chain amino acids? It was unheard of, wasn't it? And then it all came out that Vitago does nothing special and taking branched chain amino acids by themselves does absolutely nothing. We both sold a lot. We sold a lot of it. We believed in it. We believed in it.
We believe that, we are honest salesmen. Like, we only sold what we believed until we no longer believed in it. And that's part of the reason why I had to take myself off the floor of my supplement store. People would come in and they say, do I need these EAAs? And I'd be like, do you train fasted? And they go, no. And I go, you don't need them. I'd be like, shit, it cost myself a sale. So, some of that stuff is a little bit overrated. But again, it's all case dependent and based on context. And if you are training in a fasted state, I do think you'll benefit. But if you've had a big plate of chicken and rice an hour and a half before your workout, you've probably got plenty of blood sugars and circulating amino acids, and you're not going to get much benefit.
Nice. Now, let's say someone's been dieting for maybe a few weeks and they look in the mirror and it looks like they've lost everything. I'm nowhere near as full. Looks like my body fat might be even standing out a bit more. I've gone skinny fat. There's a few things here that you need to counsel someone through. But listen, genuinely, Scotty, I've been in that situation myself, knowing that it's coming up and still looking in the mirror and talking down to myself. That initial skinny fat stage, it can really affect your self-confidence, can't it, when you start a diet?
Yeah, it really can. And this is something that I address with every single one of my contest prep clients. Because, I think in the beginning, you lose muscle glycogen potentially at a similar rate to you losing body fat. And when it comes to muscle glycogen, for every gram of glycogen you lose 2 grams of fluid. So it does appear that your muscles are deflating to a degree, and to a degree they are. So yeah, it looks like you're losing your gains, your hard fought gains that you accumulated over the course of the off season. But in reality, the contractile tissue is there. It's just not storing as much fluid in it. So you will get through it. But yeah, it's a very depressing start of a diet, the skinny fat phase. We've all been there. And if you're about to commence a fat loss phase, you can expect to experience that over the first few weeks as well.
it's terrible. It really is. And, actually the only thing that's worse than that is the hunger and cravings that come about when you are dieting. A couple of ways around it. Number one, a high protein, high fiber diet's going to be fantastic for making you feel satisfied. Higher protein foods signal to the brain that you're satisfied. The higher fiber diet, you have that bulk passing through the digestive system. But there's going to be some hunger, isn't there? Like, people shouldn't run away from it or be fearful of it. It's, in my experience, what I tell people is it's a sign that you're being successful. You don't want to be that hungry that you can't function and, your brain's not working and you've got yourself in some low energy availability zone where you're just feeling absolutely terrible and, you'd rather look at a cheesecake than maybe your wife or your partner. So, we certainly don't want to be getting to that point. But listen, some hunger is going to be part of it, and it's a very good sign that you are heading in the right direction. Apart from higher protein, higher fiber, are there any strategies that you use with your clients who might be struggling just with that component of the actual, body fat reduction phase?
Yeah, well, as a general rule of thumb, I do move my clients over from the lower volume foods to the higher volume foods, like, lower caloric density. So you might go from having white rice to sweet potato to low carb potato to green veg, and you can just keep eating 300 grams of each one. But every single time you make the change, you're reducing your calorie intake and increasing the deficit. But inevitably, the hunger comes, because the hunger is, to a degree, a byproduct of your composition. And the leaner you get, the more your body perceives that you are lacking the previously held stored energy, and it wants you to go out and store some more energy. It's a survival mechanism, and it's a pretty damn successful one. It's prevented humans from accidentally starving to death over thousands of years. So, my best advice is the advice I got when I asked Dean McKillop this one time at a seminar. I said, "What do you recommend for those that are struggling with hunger?" And he said, "Acceptance." And honestly, it was the best thing I ever heard, because to me, I was always trying to chase it away. I was like, maybe I can have a sugar-free jelly. Maybe I can just pound down 500 grams of celery or something like this. And in reality, I was just giving that hunger more time, more attention. I was devoting more of my thoughts to it when I just accepted it as an inevitable part of the process, understood that it in and of itself was not a form of stress, but perhaps how I responded to it was. It became a lot easier to tolerate. So yeah, drink some water and understand that this is part of you achieving your goals.
And that concept of homeostasis, the body's settling point for all of your physiological processes. If you're in a calorie deficit, maybe you're picking up the work rate, you're going to notice stronger hunger signals. If you are able to maintain a new composition for an extended period of time, that becomes your new homeostasis. That becomes your new settling point. And hunger signals certainly seem to moderate over time. And you can find that I'm at this new body composition. Those hunger signals are nowhere near what they were, and it becomes much more sustainable. So one of the goals after the body fat reduction needs to be a period of time where you're going to maintain that composition. This isn't for someone who's competing, of course. This is for someone who's just trying to get into a bit of shape. Trying to maintain that for as long as possible, that becomes the new normal, and it becomes a lot easier then. You can stuff up. You can have a week where maybe you go away and you enjoy some great food and maybe you put on a kilo of fluid, but then it comes back very quickly, versus someone who's in the middle of dropping body fat. They've been a higher body fat percentage. They have a bad week and, the scales come up maybe 2 kilos and it's like, wow, how's that happen? You want to do some time at that new composition to really make it that new set point that you have.
Yeah, I've seen that as well, Luke, and I've experienced that myself. I am now leaner than I was in my sort of off seasons, typically when I was bodybuilding, partly out of necessity. I want to live longer, and partly because, as Mila Sarkev knows, I just ate like a fat bastard back when I was competing. So, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, the set point theory, I think, has been proven time and time again. And if you are naturally a little bit heavier, you will struggle a little bit more in terms of hunger, but you can acclimatize. I've seen it many, many times. And what else I've often seen is that the people will say, yeah, I'm not as hungry as I used to be anymore on this diet. And then their weight loss slows down. Sometimes you need to be hungry, is what I've concluded.
You do. And there's restriction doesn't work in the long term. Moderation is the key. So there's a lot of strategies you can do where you still get to literally have your cake and eat it too. Refeed days, reward meals, some discretionary calories. So all of this can be factored in. If we break a few of those down, let's start with refeed day, Scotty. If someone's in a fairly aggressive calorie deficit, how often are you giving them a refeed day? I know it depends on the individual, but just as a general rule.
Yeah, it is a pretty wide window there. I would say maybe once a week. So the main reason I'm using refeed days is to address fatigue. If you're becoming heavily fatigued, your behaviors are going to change, and they're going to change in a manner which conserves calories. And we will have seen this many times, and we would have experienced this many times. And if you've ever been around a competitive bodybuilder who's deep in the latter stages of their contest prep, they're unbelievable at conserving energy, and they're doing so subconsciously. And most of it is driven by fatigue. And it's been to the point where I'll have people sit down in my office and I'll be talking to them. They might be 3 weeks out of a show. They will not fidget once. They will not shift their body weight in their seat. You'll tell them to look at something, they'll look with their eyes rather than even swivel their head. It is amazing how much you can conserve energy, but a lot of that is subconscious and a lot of that is driven by fatigue. So when people are exhausted, I would like to give them a refeed day, and I like to couple that with low output. It is basically just a recovery day, and it is designed to not so much regulate metabolism, which is what a lot of people think it's for. It's to address fatigue, which in turn elevates their NEAT in the coming days, because they're just going to do more things and fidget more and move more subconsciously. So that's typically how I gauge it. It is based off of your fatigue and performance more so than anything else. But there is also a big psychological component. And for some people, refeed days are an incentive plan. And I've had clients where they're just struggling to stick to the diet, but if they have a refeed day coming up, they can suffer for 5 or 6 days. So there is a psychological component and there's a physiological component to it. And good fat loss plans address both. So again, it's very much dependent on the individual, but I'm intrigued by your protocols.
Mate, would you believe, with a lot of general population clients who are just looking to drop body fat, the biggest obstacle comes for after dinner eating. I'm at home, I've eaten dinner, I'm watching TV, I just want something sweet. There's a few things there. Number one, you're relaxed and you're not doing as much and you're closer to the pantry. So there is a psychological sort of aspect there. But this is where discretionary calories are fantastic. If you're aiming for 90 or 95%, let's say, clean foods, whole foods, that's how you're hitting your calorie and macro targets, having 5 to 10% discretionary calories per day, don't think of it as, you're cheating or going backwards. Research has shown that long-term body fat reduction, long-term weight loss comes off the back of moderation, not restriction. So it is about being able to enjoy everything. It's about being able to have a treat, make it work and fit in. And I found that I have a lot of luck with that concept of discretionary calories. Another one is potentially doing a bit of calorie banking. Maybe you've got an event coming up and you know on Saturday night, look, I've got this work function. There's going to be a 3-course meal. I want to have a couple of beers. That's it. I'm just going to leave it at that. Throughout the day, if you conserve carbohydrates and you conserve fats and put it towards that back end of the day meal, you could end up with the best part of 1,000 calories or even 1,500 calories if you want to push it just for that meal. You still want to space protein out across the day, because if you have too much protein in the one meal, you're going to hit that muscle full effect. It's not going to continue to contribute to muscle protein synthesis. So spacing the protein out across the day is still important, but you can really put a lot of those carbs and fats towards the end of the day to enjoy that sort of that meal out. And that's saying that we really push, everyone that we work with is that idea that if you want something, don't restrict, make it work, make it fit. Moderation is going to be your best friend.
I think that's a great policy, and I think that would work incredibly well for people that have a good relationship with food or a normal relationship with food. I work with some crazy people, Luke, and if you calorie bank and then you're hungry and then you're surrounded by temptation at the social event, that sometimes things can spiral and that can do damage. And same with discretionary calories. I'm just going to eat some more processed food. Oh my God, this is it'll be some highly palatable, delicious treat that they haven't had all day. And that can also get out of control. So, yeah, I agree. Those are great strategies for some people, and for others, perhaps not.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. I completely agree. I really do. Mate, if we change direction a bit and we go to supplements now. So you're in the middle of this body fat reduction. You're having some success. There's a few supplements that are your best friend. For me personally, omega-3 fats, creatine, caffeine, they're the big three. Protein powder, of course, because it's an easy way to get your protein in. But is there anything else that you would recommend to your clients when it comes to body fat reduction supplement-wise?
only if they're at the extreme end of an extreme diet. And then I'd be looking at micronutrient intake, because you might be so restricted in terms of the foods that you can ingest that you're starting to become deficient in certain micronutrients. But outside of that, no, a good protein powder, some good fats, some fiber, and some caffeine. Creatine's always good. Those are the staples. Anything above and beyond that, thermogenic protein powders, all that sort of stuff. Not a huge fan, but look, for some people, there might be a flow-on benefit, like from some of the stimulant-based fat burners. Perhaps it's just the fact that they do cause a little bit of appetite suppression, and maybe that's all you need. Maybe that's even just a placebo effect of, I've taken my fat burner, I'm going to have a fantastic workout now, I'm going to burn heaps of calories on the stepper, or whatever it may be. But as a general rule of thumb, the moderate, the healthy approach, it's more sustainable, and the more sustainable approach is generally going to yield the best possible results.
Now, mate, we're getting to the end of this body fat reduction. It's nearly summer. Calories are super low. My results have started to plateau a little bit. Does this mean I've got to take out more calories and add in more cardio? Maybe in some circumstances it does. Or if I'm getting close to the body compositional goal that I want to be at, even though it's counterintuitive and a lot of people would think, don't do this at all, but it could be that a calorie increase or a series of calorie increases is actually what I need to not just maintain this, but maybe even continue with the body fat reduction, but at the very least maintain my new composition. Staying on low calories indefinitely, that's a dead end road, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's just unsustainable, and no one is willing to be permanently miserable just to look good. So you have to be able to function and enjoy life to some extent. And I'm sure we've both seen clients where you've slightly bumped up their calories and their fat loss is almost accelerated as a result, or you've managed to bump it up and their fat loss is maintained, or perhaps they just return to maintenance calories, but they feel better. All of these things are desirable outcomes. And again, all of it is a byproduct of perhaps just energy availability and the ability to then expend more calories, perhaps perform at a higher level. So yeah, if you have dieted down to the point where fatigue and hunger and just general enthusiasm for life have significantly declined, it's probably time for a calorie increase. Now, you don't want to ever come out of a deficit and then just go, that's it, diet's over, YOLO, I'm going to eat everything. Because if you're in a metabolically suppressed state, you are going to accumulate body fat fairly rapidly. But if you can maintain that discipline, and if you can sort of pull out of the deficit before you begin to completely resent it, and you can maintain that discipline, then you should be able to do pretty well and retain really good body composition for quite an extended period of time.
And that's right on the money. The longer that you can do it, that new body composition, the greater the chances are that's your new permanent. That's where you're at. I am referencing Lane Norton again. I don't know. I think it's somewhere from 12 to 24 months it can take for that homeostasis point to be reached. So look, it is a longer term process. Like, you might be able to drop the body fat in a few months, but you want to try to hold it then for at least 12 to 18 months minimum. And that potentially is going to be your new composition. All right, Scotty, I think we've covered a lot for body fat reduction. Mate, thanks for coming on the episode as always. Listen, if you're loving this content, please give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification bell if you want to be notified when a new episode drops. We are dropping episodes every week, and thank you for watching Max's Muscle TV. There's no cure for this.